Somewhere under England, the water is rising. It has been rising all night. In a passage barely wide enough for a man's shoulders, it climbs the walls in the dark, and it does not stop. Above ground, a horse walks in a circle. It has walked this circle every day of its life. The rope turns. A bucket comes up. The water goes back into the earth it came from, and the water wins. It always wins. Under that water is the fuel that will build the modern world. Coal enough to light cities that have not been imagined yet. But nobody alive can reach it. This is the story of the machine that solved it. The machine that broke the oldest limit in human history and made everything you have ever touched possible. And of the two men who built it, both of them died with nothing. Neither of them has a marked grave. To understand what was about to happen, you have to understand what the world was before it. For 10,000 years, human beings lived under a ceiling, not one you could see. Everything ever built had been lifted by muscle. A man, an ox, a horse. Water could turn a wheel where there was a river. Wind could turn a stone when the wind agreed to blow. But when the river froze, the work stopped. That was the ceiling. Every empire, every cathedral, every road ever laid had been built beneath it. And in all that time, not one human being had ever found a way to lift it. The first crack came from something ordinary. Firewood. England ran on wood. It heated the house. It smelted the iron. It built the ships. And through the 1500s, the price of it began to move. Firewood had cost roughly the same for generations. By the 1580s, it cost 4 times as much. By the 1620s, 10 times. Historians still argue about why, whether England was truly running out of trees, or whether the shortages were local and the panic was louder than the problem. The argument is not settled, but the prices are not in dispute. And a price is a kind of truth. It tells you what a thing costs a family in winter, which is how a country that despised coal, filthy, stinking, the fuel of the desperate, began to burn it anyway. Not because anyone wanted to, because warmth had become expensive. At first, coal was easy. It sat near the surface and you dug it out of the hill. Then the easy coal ran out, so they went down. Deeper than anyone had gone before, deeper than was sensible. And somewhere down there, in the dark, they broke through into the thing that had been waiting for them the entire time. Water. Dig below the water table and the earth pushes back. It does not push back once. It pushes back forever. So they fought it with what they had. Buckets hauled by hand all day, every day. Chains of horses walking in circles year after year, dragging water toward a sky they would never see. Whole fortunes were spent on horses whose only job was to hold back a flood. And when the water finally won, and it always finally won, the mine was simply left, abandoned, drowned, written off. So here is where England stood, standing on top of more energy than any nation on earth, held back by nothing but water. They did not need a genius. They needed a machine that could do what no machine had ever done, a machine that could lift. And the strange thing is, it had already been invented 1,600 years earlier. In Roman Egypt, in a workshop in Alexandria, there was a toy, a hollow bronze sphere, mounted over a fire, with 2 small bent nozzles. Heat the water. The steam finds the nozzles, and the sphere begins to spin. It is called the Aeolipile. It appears in a book by Hero of Alexandria in the 1st century. Though he may only have been writing down something built 200 years before him, by a man named Ctesibius. We do not know who made the first one. We know exactly what happened next. Nothing. For 1600 years. Nothing. It spun, it was clever, visitors were delighted, and then it sat on a shelf because it had no work to do, and no world capable of giving it any. The idea was not the problem. The idea was never the problem. 1643. Italy. A man named Torricelli fills a tube with mercury and turns it upside down. The mercury falls and stops, and above it sits a small space containing absolutely nothing. The first vacuum any human being had ever made. 11 years later, in Magdeburg, Otto von Guericke takes 2 copper hemispheres, fits them together, and pumps the air out from inside. Then he harnesses 16 horses to them, 8 on each side. The horses strain. The crowd watches, and the hemispheres do not come apart. For centuries, horses had been losing to water. Now, they were losing to nothing at all. Because nothing, it turns out, has force. Empty a space, and the entire weight of the sky above you comes rushing in to fill it. And the sky is very, very heavy. Denis Papin understood this before almost anyone. A French Huguenot, driven out of his own country, working in exile. In 1679, he builds a pressure cooker, and then, because it keeps exploding, he invents the safety valve. A year later, he does something no one had done. He places a piston inside a cylinder, boils water beneath it, lets the steam condense. And the atmosphere drives the piston down. That is the engine. That is every engine that has ever been built since. Papin never turned it into a working machine. He died in London around 1712, poor and forgotten. Nobody knows where he is buried. He was the first man this story would do that to. He would not be the last. And it kept happening. 1606, Spain. Geronimo de Ayans patents a steam-powered pump, and there are records of it draining water from a flooded silver mine. A full century before anyone in England managed the same thing. Then he vanishes from the story entirely. 1663. The Marquis of Worcester builds a steam device into the wall of Raglan Castle. It works. Nobody will put money behind it. It dies with him. The invention kept being born. The world kept refusing to hold it. 1698. Thomas Savery takes out a patent for raising water by the impellent force of fire. He calls his machine the miner's friend. It has no piston. It hauls water up a pipe using a vacuum, and it can manage about 30 feet, nowhere near deep enough for a real mine. The boilers burst. The miner's friend was not much of a friend. But those words in the patent, raising water by the impellent force of fire, were vague enough to cover any machine on Earth that used fire to move water. Parliament extended it. It would stand until 1733. Remember that. Now, Dartmouth, on the coast of Devon. An ironmonger named Thomas Newcomen sells tools to the tin mines. He is a Baptist lay preacher. He has no scientific training, no patron, no university behind him. What he has is customers who are drowning. For somewhere between 10 and 14 years, in a workshop, he and a glazier named John Calley build models. They fail, they build again. Nobody writes any of it down. Nobody is watching. And then in 1712, at the Coneygree Coal Works near Dudley Castle, it works. Steam enters a cylinder, cold water is sprayed in. The steam collapses into a vacuum, and the whole weight of the atmosphere comes down on the piston and drags the great beam over. 12 strokes a minute. Again and again. It does not tire. It does not sleep. It does not have to be fed hay. For the first time in the history of our species, fire is doing the work of muscle. The water starts coming up, and it does not stop coming up. Thomas Newcomen had built the most important machine in 1,000 years. he was not permitted to own it. Savery's patent, those few broad words, swallowed his engine whole. To sell his own invention, Newcomen had to go into partnership with the men who held the paper. He never grew rich. He kept the ironmonger's shop until the end. He died in 1729 at a friend's house in London and was buried at Bunhill Fields. Nobody today knows where. And there was one more problem. The engine worked. It was also ravenous. It drank coal so fast that it was only worth running in one place on Earth, sitting directly on top of a coal mine where the fuel was almost free. It had solved the water. It had solved nothing else. Britain now owned a machine that could barely afford to feed itself, and no one had the faintest idea how to fix that, until a young instrument maker in Glasgow was handed a broken model and told to repair it. Glasgow, 1763. A model of a Newcomen engine arrives at the university. Broken. It is handed to the instrument maker who keeps the workshop. A thin, sickly Scot in his late 20s named James Watt. He is not a professor. He is the man who fixes things. He repairs it. And then he cannot leave it alone, because the model runs a few strokes and dies. It cannot hold its breath. So Watt does something nobody had bothered to do in 50 years of these machines pounding away across England. He measures it. What he finds is almost unbelievable. Roughly 4/5 of all the heat going into that engine is being thrown away, not used, wasted. And he works out why. Every stroke, cold water is sprayed into the cylinder to condense the steam, which means every stroke, the cylinder itself is chilled, and the next charge of steam arrives, and spends most of itself just warming that iron back up. The engine is boiling a kettle in order to boil a kettle. For 50 years it had been doing this in front of everyone, and nobody had asked. May 1765. Watt is walking, and the answer arrives in a form so simple it is almost insulting. Don't cool the cylinder. Let the steam rush out into a second vessel, a separate chamber, and condense it there. Keep the cylinder hot, always hot. Let the cold live somewhere else. That is it. That is the whole idea. A separate condenser. It would eventually cut coal consumption to a fraction of the old engine's appetite, and it would carry his name for 250 years. Watt had it in the spring of 1765. He would not have a working, sellable engine until 1776. 11 years. And this is the part of the story nobody tells you, because a good idea on its own is worth almost nothing. Watt builds, the cylinders leak. Steam escapes past the piston no matter what he packs it with, rope, cloth, oiled leather, because the cylinders being cast in Britain are not truly round. They are close to round. Close is useless. Every gap is a wound the steam pours out of. The engineer John Smeaton examined Watt's engine and gave a verdict that ought to be carved somewhere. He said that neither the tools nor the workmen existed who could build such a machine. Read that again. The idea was correct. The idea was finished. The idea was sitting there, complete, in 1765. And the human race was not yet capable of making it. Money runs out first. His backer, John Roebuck, pours a fortune into the engine and goes bankrupt doing it. Watt takes work as a canal surveyor. For 8 years he walks the routes of Scotland with a measuring chain, marking out ditches, while the most important invention of the age sits in a workshop, going nowhere. In 1773, his wife Margaret dies in childbirth while he is away on a survey. Around this time he writes a line that does not sound like a man on his way to becoming a legend. Of all things in life, there is nothing more foolish than inventing. He was 33. He was in debt, he was a widower, and the engine did not work. Then two things happen, and neither of them is a flash of genius. The first is money. Roebuck's ruined stake passes to a Birmingham manufacturer called Matthew Boulton, a man who understood something Watt did not, which is that an invention without capital is only a rumour. Boulton takes Watt to Parliament, and in 1775 they do something extraordinary. They persuade the state to extend Watt's patent, not by a few years, but all the way to the year 1800. 25 years of protection. Hold on to that. It will come back. The second thing is a hole. In Shropshire, an ironmaster named John Wilkinson had been trying to bore cannon barrels that didn't burst and kill the men firing them. To do it, he built a machine that held the boring bar rigid at both ends, so it could not wander. He was not thinking about steam. He was thinking about artillery. But that machine could bore a cylinder, not nearly round. In 1776, Watt writes about one of Wilkinson's cylinders, 6 feet across, and says that at its worst point, it does not stray from true by more than the thickness of a thin sixpence. A coin, 6 feet of iron, accurate to the width of a coin. And there it is, the whole story in one sentence. The Eolipile spun in Alexandria and changed nothing. Ions drained a mine and vanished. Worcester built it into a castle wall and no one would fund him. Papin drew the piston and died unmarked. Newcomen made it work and was not allowed to own it. None of them lacked the idea. What the world lacked was the ability to make a metal tube truly round. And the money to wait while someone learned how. Genius was never the bottleneck. The bottleneck was a coin's width of iron. 1776. The first two Boulton and Watt engines go to work. They burn a fraction of the coal. They run on a quarter of the fuel of the machines they replace. Orders come in from the Cornish tin mines, where every lump of coal has to be shipped in and is therefore precious. The engine that had been waiting 1600 years finally had a world that could build it. And then, Watt did something that changed everything again. He made it turn. Up to now, the engine could only go up and down, a great beam nodding at the sky, pumping water. Useful in a mine, useless anywhere else. Watt geared the beam to a wheel. Up and down became round and round. And the moment the engine could spin a shaft, it could drive anything. A loom, a lathe, a hammer, a whole building full of machines. The steam engine walked out of the mine. It was about to find something else to do. And the men who owned it were about to discover that a machine which never sleeps needs workers who never stop. They would find them. They would find them very young. The engine turns a wheel. That sentence sounds small. It rebuilt the world. Because for the whole of human history, a workshop had to stand where the power was. Beside a river, on a hilltop where the wind came. Power was a place, and you went to it. Now power was a machine, and the machine could be delivered. A mill could stand anywhere. On flat ground, on bad ground, in a town with no river at all, if that town had coal and a road. And the men building them understood something immediately. If the power now came in a crate, then so could the workers. So they built where the people were. Or more often they built, and the people came. Lancashire, then Manchester. Fields turn into foundations, foundations turn into brick. Brick turns into 6 stories of window, and behind every window, a shaft turning, and off that shaft, belts, and off every belt, a machine that does not stop. A village becomes a town. A town becomes something nobody has a word for yet. By 1850, Manchester has been given a nickname, Cottonopolis, the city of cotton. A place where the sky over the rooftops has gone permanently the colour of a bruise, and the rain comes down grey. Now walk inside. For 10,000 years, work had a rhythm, and the rhythm was the sun. You rose with it. You stopped when it left. In winter, you did less. In summer, you did more. That is how every human being who ever lived had organized a day. The engine does not know what the sun is. The engine runs at the same speed at 4 in the morning as it does at noon. And so, for the first time, the clock replaces the sky. A bell rings. You are inside or you are fined. 12 hours, 14. 6 days a week in a room where the air is white with cotton dust and the noise is so constant that workers learn to lip read. The machine sets the pace. The human being keeps up. And there was a problem the mill owners solved in the most efficient way available to them. The new machines had gaps, small ones. Underneath the moving frames, loose cotton gathered, and it had to be cleared. While the machine was running, because stopping the machine cost money. An adult cannot fit under there, a child can. They were called scavengers. Some of them were 8 years old, some were younger. They crawled beneath the working looms and swept the fluff from under the moving parts. And then they crawled out again. And then they did it again, for 12 hours. Others were pieces, small enough, quick enough, to lean into the frame and knot a broken thread while it moved. They were paid a fraction of an adult's wage, sometimes a tenth. That was not an accident. That was the reason. Child labour was not invented by the factory. Children had always worked on farms in workshops beside their mothers. What the factory did was take that child away from the field, put them under a machine that could not see them, and make it last 14 hours. Britain would eventually pass laws against it. It took decades. It took a generation of children first. So here is the ledger, and I want to be honest about both columns. The engine made cloth cheap enough that a poor family could own more than one set of clothes. It made iron cheap. It made light. It broke the ceiling that had sat over every human life since the beginning. And it did that by feeding on the bodies of the people who ran it. Both of those things are true. Anyone who tells you only one of them is selling you something. But there was another cost, and this one is stranger. By now, Boulton and Watt held a patent that ran until the year 1800. Every engine in Britain that used a separate condenser owed them money. They defended that paper ferociously, and they had the courts on their side. And James Watt had a conviction. He believed that high-pressure steam forced into a cylinder under real pressure, pushing the piston with its own violence instead of relying on the weight of the air, was lethal. That boilers would burst, that men would die. He was not being paranoid. Boilers did burst, men did die. But he was also the man who owned the door. When his own employee, William Murdoch, built a working model of a steam carriage in the 1780s, he was discouraged from taking it further. For 25 years, the most powerful engineering firm in the world used the law to hold high-pressure steam in a cage. The man who freed the engine from the mine had become the reason it could not leave the building. And the patent had an expiry date. The year 1800. In Cornwall, a mining engineer's son, 6'2", famously stubborn, famously reckless, had already been building high-pressure engines in secret, working around the edges of Watt's patent, waiting for the day it died. He was about to put fire on wheels. It would make him one of the most important men who ever lived, and it would ruin him completely. The year 1800. Watt's patent expires. And in Cornwall, a man who has been waiting for that date does not waste a season. Richard Trevithick, 6'2", a mine captain's son, described by his schoolmaster as slow and obstinate. Cornwall had tin and no coal. Every lump had to be shipped in. So a Cornish engineer thinks about fuel the way a starving man thinks about bread. And Trevithick has an idea Watt spent 25 years calling murder. Stop waiting for the sky to push the piston. Force steam into the cylinder under real pressure, and let it shove. You lose the condenser, you lose the vast beam, you lose the engine house and the foundations and the 20 tons of masonry. What's left is small enough to lift onto a cart. Christmas Eve, 1801. On a hill in Camborne, Trevithick's machine climbs a slope under its own power with 7 or 8 men clinging to it in the rain. They called it the Puffing Devil. For the first time, the engine is carrying itself. 21st of February, 1804, Penydarren Ironworks, South Wales. His backer has laid a wager of 500 guineas that a steam engine can haul 10 tons of iron along the tramway to the canal. It hauls the 10 tons. It also hauls 5 wagons and 70 men who climbed aboard because they wanted to say they'd been there. 9 miles. Slower than a horse. It doesn't matter. The world's first railway journey has just happened, and everyone standing beside that track is watching the end of the horse. Trevithick gave the world the engine we still recognize. The world gave him nothing. He went to South America to sell engines to the silver mines and lost everything in a war he had no part in. He came home in 1827, penniless, to find high-pressure steam running the country and other men rich from it. Near the end, he wrote a letter. He said he had been branded with folly and madness for attempting what the world called impossibilities, and that even the great James Watt had said he deserved hanging for bringing the high-pressure engine into use. Then he wrote this, that the pride of having been useful to his country far exceeded riches. He died on the 22nd of April, 1833, in a room above a hotel in Dartford. Pneumonia. No family came. No friends came. The men from the ironworks where he'd been working passed a hat round to pay for the coffin. They carried it themselves. And then they paid a night watchman to sit by the grave, because body snatchers were working the district, and Richard Trevithick had nothing left for them to steal but himself. He was buried in an unmarked grave. Papin, Newcomen, Trevithick. 3 men. 3 graves nobody can find. And the machine they died for went everywhere. Iron rails opened across Britain, then across continents. A journey that had taken a family 3 days took 4 hours. Fish arrived inland still fresh. A letter crossed the country in a morning. Distance, the thing that had shaped every human life since we came down from the trees, simply stopped meaning what it had always meant. It went further than that. Every town in Britain had kept its own time, set by its own noon. That was fine for a village. It was impossible for a timetable. So the railways imposed one time on the whole country. The engine had already taken the sun out of the working day. Now it took the sun out of the clock. Go and look at a power station tonight. Anyone, anywhere on Earth. Coal, gas, nuclear. Look past the cooling towers and the turbine hall and the switchgear and find what is actually happening in there. They are boiling water. They are boiling water to turn a wheel. Steam turbines generate most of the electricity on this planet. The reactor is new. The fuel is new. The idea is 300 years old and it belongs to an ironmonger from Devon who was never allowed to own it. We did not replace the steam engine. We only found new things to burn. The screen you are reading this on is warm because somewhere, right now, water is boiling. The fire that men lit under a cylinder to push back a flood in the dark never went out. It just got bigger. And the horse walking its circle at the top of the shaft, it finally stopped walking. Every revolution in this story began the same way. Someone looked at a problem the whole world had accepted and refused to accept it. That is what this channel is about. Not dates, not names to memorize. The moments when everything changed and the people who paid for it. There are more of these stories coming, the ones that built the world you woke up in this morning. If you want to be there when the next one arrives, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It is the only way you will know. I will see you at the next revolution.